Good morning or good afternoon. Once again, I want to welcome all those listeners on radio stations CKJS 810 AM and also those listening on the internet. I am delighted to return to the airwaves on the Jewish Hour, and I'm happy to have today with me a husband and wife to interview. My name is Gerry Posner, and I do urge you, the listening audience, to contact me if you have any suggestions for possible guests to have on in the future, or you can also let Sid Halper know. Today, I am very privileged to have with me a couple known as Sergio and Miriam Glogowski. They are from Argentina, although Sergio actually hails from Brazil. They've been in Winnipeg for, quite a number of years now, but I don't want to take over their story. I want them to do that. Personally, this is the first time that I've had as guests two people at the same time. It's also the first time we've had guests that come from another country like Argentina. We did have an Israeli guest, but that was a former Winnipegger. And I know that there's a story. I think actually there's a book to be told. There will be a book, I'm convinced of it, in the future about the Argentinian immigration into Winnipeg, Canada. And so this is the beginning of the book. It's an interview with one of the families that has come to this country that is integrated into Winnipeg. So before I begin, I like to let my guests at least tell us who they are, and not just who they are, but who their parents were.
Okay. I will start. Okay. Yes. My name is Sergio Glogowski, as Gerry just told. And I was born in Brazil, and I am first generation in Brazil. My parents came from Germany and Austria. They ran from the war, 1936, 1938. I have a family that actually escaped from 1941. Mm-hmm. And
And they came straight to Brazil.
And they came straight to Brazil. Mm-hmm. They were lucky to get there. They tried other countries. They finally got a visa in Brazil. And actually, my grandfathers, they came before. They worked, they made money, and they brought the rest of the family.
Okay.
Well, in my case, I'm Miriam from Argentina. I was born in Argentina. My parents were born in Argentina, but my grandparents came from Russia, from my dad's side, and from Poland, from my mom, and they came before the Second World War. So my parents were born in Argentina, and I was raised in like we lived a Jewish life and a very Zionist life, always thinking about Israel. And for some reason, my family, when I was little, didn't go. My dad is retired now, but he is a dentist. And at that time, somebody said, it's not a good time to go, and that failed. But at the end, I ended up in Israel when
What was your name before you married a Glogowski?
You pronounce that right, Glogowski. I was Kogan. In English sounds, because in Argentina it's Kogan, but it spells with double O.
Oh, I see.
So here is Kogan, yes, but with C and not with K.
All right. So the two of you, I mean, as I understand your story a little bit, you left Brazil and went to Israel.
That's right. I went to study in the Technion and ended in a kibbutz. And that's where picking oranges, and there was I picked my wife, which was there.
Better than any orange that you ever picked.
Yeah, it was she didn't look like so much orange at that time, but she went there for taking a group of kids for 2 months for picking oranges, which was a normal thing that you do there. Uh-huh. And she met me, and she stayed, and we got married in Argentina.
You did.
And I went back to Israel and lived there for 8 more years.
What year was that you went back to Israel after you were married to settle in Israel?
Well, that was 1979. We just traveled to Argentina for the marriage. It's not that we went back.
Right, I got you.
Yeah, and then I was at university at that time, so I continued my studies in Israel. And we stayed there, and we had 2 of our 3 kids were born there. Uh-huh. First Gadi, and then Karen. and we stayed there until 1986.
Okay, and what happened in 1986 that caused you to leave Israel, where I gather you had made a decision to stay?
Yeah, it was, well, I had my mom very sick in Argentina, and it was a really tough situation. So we decided, or I decided, and Sergio supported me. Like, he wasn't very happy. And we went to Argentina thinking that it will be for a few years, really. But, well, it didn't improve the situation for a long time. But, well, when my mom passed away, so we decided actually it's time to go back to Israel.
That would be about 1997?
Right there.
Yeah, 96.
I guess you had managed to find work in Argentina. And
We worked in our fields. I more or less, because I was in microbiology, but there was no paid research in Argentina, so I ended up teaching biology. But it was okay. And we had there another boy, Joel, was born there in Buenos Aires. And we really were about to go back to Israel until one trip that Sergio.
Okay, Sergio, tell us about that.
Okay, so as the things that happen in life, right? The turning points in your life, and I can pinpoint them very exactly. But this one was funny. I was on a trip. My company sent me to Bolivia, from Buenos Aires to Bolivia, in Santa Cruz de la Sierra, which is not a big city, but it's an oil city where I was working for our company at that moment. And in this plane, I met a friend of mine from Maccabi, the Jewish club in Argentina. And we were talking, and I said, what are you doing here in this airplane to Santa Cruz de la Sierra? I said, no, the airplane actually goes to Miami, and I'm thinking on leaving Argentina because the situation is not very good at that. It wasn't very good at that time, but not bad, but not good as well. And he said, oh, by the way, I have a friend that's going to move to Canada, of all places. And we were looking at moving. So we got in contact with this guy. He lived in Ushuaia, which is something like 2,000 kilometers from our city.
Who was that guy?
That's Eduardo Shore, which is now living here too.
Yes.
And he introduced us to Evelyn Hecht of the Jewish Community Center.
Right.
And that's how he went. And because of that move, we brought, in the end, we have something like, I would say, 20 people that actually moved to Winnipeg because of that casual meeting in the airplane.
My goodness, that's so unusual.
Yeah.
Still, you had to make what I would call a sort of a well thought out decision. Here's somebody that had lived in Israel. You had made up your minds to go back to Israel. And then you did a complete reverse, and suddenly we're going to Canada. I mean, which wasn't even on the radar.
Well, I can explain that. First, Canada was always something that Sergio wanted to look at. But secondly, we had to make a very hard decision and choose between the two options. So I put things in a scale, right? And we, at that time, Gadi was 15, my daughter was 12, and my other son was 10. Gadi was supposed to go back and he came here and get into grade 9 or 10 maybe, and his Hebrew wasn't Hebrew to just start high school, and 2 more years go to the army. So it would have been really very hard for him. That was one point. And the second one was when we left Israel, we sold our house. A year after, the house prices tripled. So we thought that if we go back to Israel, we couldn't afford being at the same level. And really, we had to go I don't know where, because it economically was not a good option. And the time for a job also was kind of not the best for Israel. So it was in our heart, really, and it was a very tough decision.
One thing that I could add to that, we at that moment we made an exploratory visit in 97 was we made an exploratory visit to Winnipeg, and we came here was October.
Yes.
It was a quite warm October
September.
September. Sorry.
Yeah.
Quite warm September. The leaves were turning, and the city was beautiful, and people were so nice, and we felt so well here that we said that that's it. That's the city we want to come.
But am I right? You're the two of you maybe had some ability in English, I suspect, but maybe your children didn't have any exposure to English.
No, our children had no exposure to English at all. I can give you an example with Joel. He was invited, the youngest. He was invited. He was 10 years old then. He was invited to somebody's houses, and he called us and said, "Dad, what means come here?" And so that's the English he knew. So he didn't know anything. So I think it took him almost 4 months. To learn the English. He has no accent at all, and my daughter doesn't have accent at all. My older Gadi, he does have some.
I guess if your children probably were not very happy with leaving to Argentina to come to Canada.
No, they were happy.
They were?
Yeah, well, I'm not saying happy, but they were not against the idea. Wow. Actually, they had two boys they had a very bad experience.
They were mugged and robbed in the street
Sunday afternoon.
Yeah, almost. We were a block away from them, and they were mugged and robbed. And so Gadi was really.
Gadi for 1 year didn't go to take the bus by himself. Somebody had to go with him to the bus stop. And at that point, our first visit to Argentina after we lived here, he didn't come.
He didn't want to come.
He didn't come. Like, he met us in Brazil when we went. Like, he didn't want to be in Buenos Aires.
Still, when I was listing the things that seem to me are what I call real sacrifices. You gave up, not just you, but all of the people that came here. They gave up their jobs. Oh, yeah. They gave up their family in most instances. They gave up their language. They gave up their friends, and they gave up the climate. So these are not, those are significant sort of compromises to make, to move at an older age.
Yeah, but you see, on the other hand, you have to take it from the other side. You're talking from the empty side of the cup. I'm talking about the full. What did we get? We get a good life, easy life. There's no mugging on the streets. There's jobs, and even we had the sacrifice, like you said. But for us, you know what? When we talk about Winnipeg, we always think about how Winnipeggers can bash their own cities and say, "Why you came to Winnipeg? Why Winnipeg?" And this is something I can't understand. Living as we did in different cities, I can tell you this is an excellent city. Okay, you have a climate issue here or mosquitoes issue here, which we didn't have for the last 2 years. But anyway, climate issue. So what? Climate is something, it's cold now. In 6 months will be hot and will be nice. And this is a paradise in summer. And for people that likes winter, that's good too. The city is great. People treat us okay. I'll tell you, it's not easy to get inside the community here and to make friends here. The community is quite closed in general. Winnipeggers are quite closed, right? But other than that, I mean, that's great.
But on the other hand, it is a big sacrifice. It's not, and for that you have to be ready. Like, people that come thinking because they just wanted to go away from Argentina, for example, and never thought about emigrating, but they were forced because after we came here, actually in 2001, was a big problem, economical and social problem in Argentina.
Yes.
So a lot of people came here, but some of them, they never thought about coming before. So for those people, it's harder. And I don't know if there was a lot of people going back, but it's you have to immigrate, you have to be ready to sacrifice and.
Well, I can see that, and you've obviously made that decision, and you were able to do that. But I'm thinking of how hard it must be for people like your father or people of an older generation who don't have that ability to learn the language.
I feel sometimes like my dad made a big sacrifice, although he wanted to be, because my sister came here and I'm here and this is our family. But and he went to study English, but of course it's not enough to communicate with English speakers. And I think he suffers for that because he's a very cultural guy, and he would like to go and listen to conferences or watch movies, and he's restricted.
That's a challenge.
So it's a hard part of that.
Would you say that the people of your father's generation, and there's, I guess, a number of them that have now come to Winnipeg, what kind of adjustment would you say that they've made in Winnipeg?
Well, my dad is for 11 years already, and his wife, and Anna, his wife, she's working still, and she also she wanted to come more than my dad.
Is that right?
And she takes the bus to work, and so it's great. And other parents came actually in the last few years, so they are less time here. But they are integrating between them, which is good. And
so your parents would mix with some of the other people of their age, approximately.
And the same language, right? Language is
the language is the key, wouldn't you say?
Language is a barrier here. It is. It's really a problem
especially for that age.
But you do have the three generations together.
Oh yeah, it's nice because we have our kids here. My niece is here, and my sister. So
where are your children these days? Where in this how were they in school?
Well, Gadi is already an engineer. He's a computer engineer. He's working in Flyer. Karen is working in Sports Manitoba. She's studying for CGA now. She finished BSc. And Joao, he's a civil engineer, and he's doing a internship in Israel now. He will be coming back in February.
Wow.
Yeah, so
your children have definitely become Canadianized.
They are totally.
So I'm just curious, when at the dinner table, what language do you speak?
Before the boyfriends or girlfriends came, it was only Spanish. Right now, it's a mixture. We tried them to study hard Spanish, but it's not always successful.
They think that they say, well, we're in Canada, man. You should live in Spanish.
No, but
English is the language.
We speak with them in Spanish all the time. Like, of course, if there is other people around, not. But this is our language of communication, even between the kids. That sometimes it's hard because they are used to. But they were old enough. The youngest was 10, so they still spoke in English, in Spanish.
You still have I guess, a real deep affection for the state of Israel. And I understand you're actually going for a visit there in December?
Well, a month from now, we're leaving for 2 weeks.
Okay.
The excuse is that my son is there, right?
Okay.
Yeah. Well, actually, we have a lot of friends to meet and to
and we were there actually. After we left Israel in 1986, it took us 15 years to go back.
Wow.
It was really hard for us, not only economically, but hard to go back. But we went for Joel's bar mitzvah, and we did the bar mitzvah there 10 years ago. And now we go back.
Tell me about the biggest problem you faced integrating into Canadian life. What would you say was the biggest challenge that you had here? Because you both got jobs rather easily.
Yeah, well, I had Miriam took a little bit more to get the job. I got my job almost. I was 3 weeks here. I got a job.
Wow.
So, but what helped me too is that I knew English.
Yes.
And that's made a difference. I think that's the big issue, getting a job and Canadian experience. Proving Canadian experience is where a lot of people stumble too, because. You will say, well, I did this, and they will say, well, where is your Canadian experience? And they won't take you until you can prove something. But
I think that the social part it's the hardest part, because you have to learn new codes.
Culture.
Culture, but also codes,
Yeah.
because in Argentina you can just stop by your friend push the ring and they open the door, and never mind what's happening inside, you are invited. Here, like, you have to plan everything. It's ahead of time. Where they were calling me to invite me to Rosh Hashanah, let's say 3 months before or 2 months before. So who thinks about that in so much advance? But it's like this, and you get used to, and that's nothing. But really, at the beginning, you have to learn different ways of, like...
Yeah, how to behave. It's where, culture, it makes a difference. Yeah, it does. On other hand, you find a lot of people, immigrants here. So in the end, it's hard to say what really is the culture that you related to, right?
Well, you've done something that I think is a little unusual with respect to your time in Canada. Not only have you got jobs and you're working, your children have been successful, and you own a house. All of that said, what I think you've done, from what little I know of you, that is out of the sort of the norm, and I speak at least to you, Sergio, in this respect. You've become involved in the community and taken part in community affairs. And I haven't been critical, and I don't think anybody's ever been critical of any of the Argentinians or any newcomer who have not done that, because after all, you've got to get settled and get used to lifestyle here, and you have to earn a living. But you've managed to, you sit on the Jewish Federation of Winnipeg?
Yes, I sit the board of the Jewish Federation. I sit the board of Jewish Heritage Center. I'm the chairperson of the Manitoba Ethnocultural Advisory and Advocacy Council.
There's a mouthful.
Oh, yes. That's always a problem to say. I sit on the board of directors of the Argentina Association. Actually, we started this 10 years ago with our friend Henry Aizmendi, which was the first president of that, and he passed away already. But Miriam is working with immigration from Argentina. She works on the association, and she does the same work that people that helped us to come here, like Evelyn Hecht. Well, Miriam is doing the same work in the Argentina Association. And she brought some people here to Canada.
Well, we try to, when so many Argentinians started coming, especially from the Jewish community, there was a need for other Argentinians to come and have that support. So we created the program, and was accepted by the provincial nominee program, and we were liaison. So it continues that way. It's not that they are coming in waves, but if somebody wants to come, we help them. What's
your best advice to the newcomers?
Be ready.
Yeah, and think that nobody owes you anything. You have to earn it. I mean, a lot of people think that because they are coming, they should receive, and they don't understand. Sometimes it's like in Israel, when you go there to Israel, you have a soknut will help you. Here, the volunteers are doing some work, but you shouldn't expect to receive everything given. You understand what I'm saying? And a lot of you will have to work. It will be hard. The first 2 years is very hard on you. You coming back home with headache because of the English. Oh, I spoke English all day today. My head is.
Did you find yourself always comparing and saying, "Well, we didn't do it like this in Argentina, and I liked it bad. I wish we could do it that way, but here they do it different."
Well, you hear between Argentinians a lot, like a lot of comparisons, and some of them, you have, like, for example, the health here, the management of the health, it's completely different. Completely. There you call a doctor, the doctor comes to your house anytime. Well, and I'm talking about middle class who pays an insurance, okay? I'm not talking about other people that, like, the only thing they can is go to an hospital. But in general, everybody paid a fortune. and they have a good healthcare, but it's also a very spoiled one. And here it's completely different. And this is a big adjustment. You have to accept the rules, and sometimes you don't like them. So, but this is the way it is.
Right, I understand.
So we coming, like, because we lived in Israel, I think we understood much better and faster, because there is similar to here, but Argentinian is not. So for some people, it's very hard.
Right.
But when they had serious issues, that they were people with really serious issues, emergencies, they were very thankful for the health care that they got. But you don't want to try them, right? You better not.
One thing more I want to say is, for instance, comparing crimes.
Yes.
And you hear here that they're saying, well, 35 is the number today, as of today, 35 dead. Well, you have to understand that this is a 3-day number in São Paulo or in Buenos Aires, you know. That's how many people died in 3 days, killed on the street or things like this, right? So this is the difference too.
What about the Jewish lifestyle here? Are you satisfied with the way the Jewish community operates, and have you been able to adapt to a Jewish way of life here that works for you as well as it did in Argentina?
Yeah, well, we are not religious, so
right.
For us, the issues we have, for instance, we think that the life is quite expensive. To be a Jew here, you have to spend money on the synagogue and the school and things that the immigrant will have a hard time coping with. And this
right.
is what we found. But other than that, I mean, the Rady Center is fantastic, is amazing. It's something that for a community of this size, you know, you have a first-class facility. It's amazing, and cohesiveness of the community here. How people work together. How many volunteers you will find. How many people working for the good of everyone here. And I'm not talking about only Jewish. I'm talking about the good of everybody.
Right.
You have lawyers that are. There are I don't know, civil rights, right? For everyone. It's not specific for Jews.
Right.
So I think this is fantastic.
Well, that's positive to hear.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I think from the population that came from Argentina, we in general are less religious and more secular and live the Judaism through activities and social life instead of religious.
Now, just before we go any further, I just want to give you an opportunity. Sergio, how about say a few words in Portuguese to your friends listening to this in Brazil?
Okay. Bom, abraço para todos que me escutam em português, especialmente minha família do Brasil. Sei que vocês escutam isso aqui. Para meus irmãos, beijão todo, beijão para vocês.
And if you want to say something, Miriam, in Spanish.
Bueno, yo estoy contenta de estar acá y con mi familia, pero sigo queriendo a mi familia en Argentina, mis amigos y la comida de Argentina.
That's
okay,
great.
I said something I'm missing is also the food.
Well, listen, I suppose we eat at a later hour, or at an earlier hour than you do in Argentina.
Yeah.
That's another thing you have to get used to.
Yeah, that's
well,
right.
I want to thank both of you for coming here to be a part of this. As I said to you earlier, it's my view that there's going to be somebody will undertake a book on this, because there's quite a lot of stories that will have to be told. Just as there's a book called The Coming of Age,
yes,
that's the story of the Jews of Manitoba. Well, yours is another story that will follow. Thank you very much, Miriam and Sergio Glogowski.
Thank you for having us.
You.
Sure.
Okay.